When did you last try to talk to someone who was standing far away? Animals face this problem daily. They quite often communicate over very long distances. Signals in general have evolved to get their messages across, often over long distances and in dense vegetation. So there's a strong selection pressure on signals being effective in transmitting information, and here we will look at the effects of the environment and the distance. Acoustic communication is best studied in this regard, so we will focus on this one. Sound inevitably attenuates and degrades with distance. It gets pretty messy after 50 meters in a forest, as these sound spectrograms show. So the structure of a signal at its source is different from its structure at the position at which a receiver makes a decision. This is important to keep in mind. Not all the information which is signaled also gets across. We have all experienced this in our own communication. Let's have a look at some basic physics of sound transmission. First, sound inevitably gets softer with increasing distance. Because sound propagates like a sphere with increasing radius, the energy is spread out over an increasing area. At short distances from the source, the sound is spread out over a smaller surface. And at a larger distance, the sound is spread out over a larger distance. This so-called spherical loss of sound in air equals to 6 dB of loss per doubling of distance. In addition, it usually attenuates even more, which is called excess attenuation. But sound also degrades in time and frequency structure. First, high frequencies, so the higher tones, attenuate faster with distance. Their smaller wavelengths interfere more with little objects like leaves or micro air turbulences. Like hearing music from far, you mainly hear the low-frequency bass guitar and the drums, but miss high tones. This frequency-dependent attenuation is stronger in dense vegetation with all the leaves around than in open fields. As a consequence, there's a stronger selection in forests to avoid high frequencies compared to an open field. And second, sound is reflected by the vegetation, leading to reverberation, so the sound smears out in time. In fact, reverberation is the most conspicuous form of degradation in dense vegetation. As a consequence, there's strong selection in forests to avoid repeating similar notes too quickly. These basic physical processes of sound transmission allow us to make clear predictions of how an optimal signal should be structured to get its message across with the least degradation. So key adaptations in birds are birds in forests use lower frequencies than birds in open habitats. Birds in forests have slower trill rates, so they repeat the same notes less rapidly than birds do in the open. And of course, long-distance advertisement signals are louder, while close signals are soft. Animal sounds indeed show these adaptations. Here are two examples. Grasshopper warblers live in the open and have very rapid repetition intervals. And they also sing very high. Chaffinches in forests sing with slower repetition intervals and also emphasize lower frequencies. But also animals as receivers have adapted to cope with sound degradation to pick out relevant information even when the signal is degraded. In fact, not all sound degradation is negative. It also provides the receiver with important distance information. This is particularly relevant in territorial animals, where animals use long-range signals to regulate the distance and the movements. And finally, the other behavioral adaptations. Many animals signal at times or from locations that are beneficial for sound transmission. We have seen that animals have striking adaptations to getting their message across. I hope that my message also came across as well.